Should we assume now in our economic projections that we will have a gas embargo from Russia with all of the inflationary pressure that ensures?
Well, we have recognised, Francine, for some time within the European Union that this is a risk and that the nature of this risk is likely to become clearer tomorrow. And that is why within the European Union steps have been underway now for many, many months to build up our inventories of energy, particularly of gas. And it is also why today the European Commission will be bringing forward proposals to help us manage these kind of energy pressures later in the year. So it's been recognised as a risk, and we will take any steps that we can to mitigate the consequences of it.
So what kind of steps should we be thinking about at a Eurogroup level as we get into the winter months and people need their heating? Is it right to start thinking of a plan to use less gas now to make sure that we're better prepared for the winter?
So many governments within the European Union are already issuing guidance to their citizens regarding energy consumption in the time ahead. And I believe what will happen when the Commission publish proposals and governments also begin to lay out their own plans with regards to this is you'll see two areas receive particular focus. The first one is how we can better manage consumption within economies, particularly if there is going to be pressure in supply. And then secondly, what we can do to build up inventory if we do face a challenge of reduced supply for a period of time. Of course, all of this will be happening in the context of the European Union looking at what we can do to accelerate our movement to dependency on renewable energies. But that is going to take time, and in the time that is ahead, it will be about how we can manage supply in a way that mitigates the economic risk.
Yeah. Are we expecting too much of central banks? Tomorrow there's the ECB decision, of course, on interest rates. Markets pricing in a 50% chance that there's a 50 basis point hike. Are we expecting too much of central banks in dealing with inflation?
Well, what you're seeing happening within the European Union and indeed elsewhere is central banks act to deal with inflationary pressures that are broader. What we recognise is that if higher levels of inflation become embedded within the European economy, not only does it pose such a challenge to living standards today and to income and to jobs today, it also poses a real risk to the ability of the economy of the euro area and the euro area to grow in the time ahead. So the ECB will take the steps that it believes are necessary to deal with such an inflationary risk, and they've already indicated in recent meetings their thinking with regard to this.
Yeah. Minister, I know there's also reports that you're preparing, or that the Irish government is preparing to put a levy on the windfall tax on energy companies. When will you actually make a decision on this?
Well, this is only something that every other government in Europe is giving some analysis and consideration to. But I'm equally aware of the difficulties and challenges in doing this. If you look at where we are within Ireland, much of our energy supply comes through semi-state organisations that have played a really important role in the development of our energy needs over many decades. If there is a need to raise more funds from those organisations, it can be done through changes in dividend policy as opposed to changes in taxation policy. And I'm very much aware of the need to get the balance right between having stable and appropriate taxation on the energy sector, while also recognising the fact that they need to invest and we need their investment in moving to alternative and more secure sources of energy in the years ahead. So at the moment, all this has been done is given consideration, as other governments are doing, and I'm very much aware also of the risks and consequences that need to be managed in any sudden or arbitrary changes in taxation on the energy sector.
Minister, I also want to ask you about the OECD tax deal, because we understand that there's a chance now that actually wouldn't get passed through Congress, which is something that Secretary Yellen had assured it would. Does that change your thoughts on the OECD tax deal?
So the OECD process is unfolding exactly as I expected it would. This is a huge global endeavour. And as we move towards agreement, from agreement towards implementation, there are always going to be political developments. There will always be moments in which parliaments and governments consider where they are and where the next step forward is. I still expect, as we move through this year and as we move into 2023, that we will see the second pillar of that OECD agreement in regard to a minimum effective tax rate for that pillar to be delivered. I'm not going to comment on what may or may not happen within American politics. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to do so. But overall, I still believe we'll make progress on it within the European Union. And I believe globally, later on in the year, we will see progress on that rate. I'd make the point very briefly, Francine, that if we do end up in a position where no progress is made on the rate, it will pose a challenge to the overall OECD agreement and open up new risks, new challenges, and the risks of unilateral action. And I believe it's in our interest to avoid that, which is why we should work hard to implement the OECD agreement.